And I also want to give a shout out because the reason why we're here also is because Never Alone Summit and my friend James and Justin connected me to Tim, and Never Alone Summit has been an event that has happened virtually over the weekend with the Chopra Foundation and many other incredible individuals in this mindfulness space coming together around mental health awareness, because May has been Mental Health Awareness Month. So I want to give a shout out to Never Alone Summit. And I know some of the members will be joining at different points during this conversation. And please, when you do, let me know in the comments when you're here. But I just want to let them mention them, and you can follow them on social media at Never Alone Summit, because they've been such great supporters and also helping orchestrate this tonight. So Tim Chang, welcome to the conversation today. Happy Sunday.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. Really appreciate the opportunity to meet and learn from all of you.
Yes. And you know, when we spoke, we wanted to come up with a theme for tonight, and we discussed business for better versus business as usual. So for you, what does business for better mean to you?
Business for better to me means, instead of just rushing to get back to business as usual, can we take this moment, this great pause, as a lot of people have been calling this COVID moment, to really examine ourselves, our habits, but also the systems, the framework, the models we've been running towards and chasing and trying to scale everything towards right now. In Silicon Valley, we've always had this mantra for the past decade or two of growth at any cost, trying to grow unicorns of billion-dollar valuation. And I can't help but wonder, are those models and systems what have contributed to things like COVID, climate collapse, injustice, inequality? I think the answer is yes in many ways. And so with this downtime, to really be slower and still tune into questioning those systems, those frameworks, then can we start to question what comes next? My friend Nicole Bradford of Transformative Technology Lab wrote a great Medium post called Team Now versus Team Next. Team Now was all the things we have to do in crisis management of COVID today, but more importantly, there's Team Next, which is after things resume a little bit, after we flatten the curve, do we just blindly go back to work as usual, or do we take a moment to reevaluate what is the nature of the work, what are the business models we're using? Is it back to produce more, consume more, produce more, consume more, or can we take a moment to look at, hey, maybe the lesson from COVID is to reconnect a bit with nature. Maybe it's to be slower. Maybe it's to look at health at every scale as opposed to growth at any cost. So that's a deep inquiry I've been starting from this. I think many others are as well.
It's so interesting. And by the way, you look like you're like in some sort of galactic universe right now. I'm like, and I want to make sure if someone hears the tech issues, let us know, because we'll make sure that because yeah, you look like you're in some sort of like.
Well, I've been joking that curated Zoom backgrounds are the new Spotify playlist. And now that we're in the Zoom economy and this new format of work from everywhere, how people do their production value and where they're going to be starts to matter. It's a really interesting trend I'm starting to see.
Yeah. So were you always conscious about these things though? Like you have such an interesting background. You're of course leading consumer technology investments at Mayfield right now, focusing on next gen commerce, marketplaces, communities, health and wellness, and digital media. But how did you evolve into the place to have more intentionality around your investments and what you wanted to do?
If I'm honest, I'm a newcomer to this. It's a new phase of my career and something I think of as like, wow, now my job really begins. For 20 years, I've been doing the Silicon Valley venture capital game, and it was all just about putting profits up and getting in the Midas list and doing, these billion-dollar valuation unicorns without ever questioning why. So maybe I have the luxury of it at this later stage in my life to question, well, what is the deeper why? So many of us chase the what, the who, the how much, those sorts of things without having deeper why. And if one thing crisis provides, I think, is a sharpening, unifying lens of a why behind what we build and how we can better serve. We've had some fortune that some of our companies that were the most successful had more regenerative business models. Companies like Lyft, where they were reducing the number of cars being purchased and creating jobs for folks. companies like Poshmark, which encouraged resale of used clothing. Companies like Grove Collaborative trying to do sustainable home care goods that were better and more friendly eco packaging. So it just happened that these business models, which were better for the planet, I think better for humanity, started to show that they had good business results as well. And that common theme made me think, wait a minute, what if we could make that a central focus of, instead of looking at companies where it's just about profitability and growth potential, could they also just be better for humanity and the planet as well, from first principles, from the very business model? Without them having to be nonprofits or impact companies, so to speak, could you just pick companies that have that attribute from the start? So that's something that's really turned me on. And I got to say too, as I've gotten older, I've just wanted to purge all my things. And that, I don't know if you've had this, but that moment where you realize my possessions best me, and you just want to do the Marie Kondo thing and get rid of everything.
I mean, yeah. Do you feel like where you're at, living still in Silicon Valley, do you feel like that's a perspective that's being embraced, or do you feel like it's an uphill battle right now?
It's starting to be embraced. It started with millennials and Gen Z, where experiences mattered more than possessions. And amongst, I think, my cohort of folks, we've played the game, we've chased the shiny prize and achievements, and found that really wasn't what it was about. Meaning and purpose were more about being of service to something greater. And then now really tuning into being more connected with nature as well. Part of that, I think the download is, maybe we need to be a bit more connected with ourselves, with each other, our communities, and the planet. And that work for me, a lot of this began within. When I really kind of questioned my own motives and my lifestyle choices, there's a saying, as within, so expressed without. If you're always chasing something, that will just pervade in all your actions and the kind of companies you build, the energy you bring to it. Whereas if it's more about healthier balance and symbiotic relationship with your community, not just your customers, but the stakeholders all around, which includes future generations and disempowered demographics out there, the planet you're part of, you really start to think of maybe the shift away from shareholder capitalism to stakeholder capitalism. And that's something beautiful that Mark Benioff talked about at Davos this year.
Yeah, can we get into what that means exactly? Because I think that a big question is it possible to be profitable and conscious sustainable? And that's a big conflict between these conscious communities and then the business communities and, Wall Street, basically.
I agree. The hypothesis I'm playing with is, do you have to sacrifice one for the other, or is it possible to do well by doing good? And thank goodness there are companies out there that are showing that, Beyond and Impossible Meat, I think, we're mission aligned from the start on plant-based proteins, and they've shown they can build a good business while trying to be better for the environment. Companies like Poshmark and others I mentioned, which are about resale, reuse, rental, as opposed to that consumptive capitalism, just keep producing, keep selling. I think these businesses are tapping into the zeitgeist of what people want. So I'm hoping that it is possible to be both profitable and conscious and sustainable. And a lot of that comes from, I think, the business model design and your intention for what you're trying to do. So I don't know. A lot of people have, trauma from capitalism, and I understand that there's a lot of injustice often built in that system, but not clear is just capitalism is bad. It's just a tool, just like money or technology. What often matters more, what is your intention or the energy you wield those tools with? And so if you want to use business for better, and if it's not just about maximizing profit for a handful of shareholders, then there's different ways to look at what growth or value could be. So when I was talking about stakeholder capitalism, could you, for example, increase your board of directors to include a representation for the planet? I know that's a crazy, wacky idea, but for example, Paul Stamets, the mycelium guru, for one of his companies, he gave a portion of equity to the mushrooms themselves, as probably represented by maybe a nonprofit that's an expert in that area. And we'll see, groups like Earth Equity setting this up so that portions of your company can be owned by Mother Nature, perhaps as represented by leaders and scientists from leading nonprofits, maybe Shira, foundation or things like that. So I'm really keen on how board of directors can be moved beyond just key shareholders to the stakeholders. One might even argue the future generation is a stakeholder. What if a Greta Thunberg like figure was representing future generations and making sure that companies weren't just extracting the maximum for this quarter? So Jun Yun is an expert in inclusive stakeholding. I've been trying to learn a lot from his models on how we expand this notion of who stakeholders are.
That is fascinating. By the way, is anyone, I was having a bit, you were cutting in and out a bit. Is everyone else okay listening? I just want to make sure, because you're dropping so much knowledge and wisdom and it's fascinating to me. So I just want to make sure the connection's okay. Okay, Brian, cutting out for Allison.
Okay, let me adjust the mic, make sure it's clear.
Yeah, I think it's the connection maybe.
Okay, gotcha.
But I don't know. I'm assuming you're on, okay. Yeah, maybe the connection, but I'll let you know. Just let us know in the comments if you're having issues, you guys, and so we'll adjust. I find that so interesting, like giving a shroom equity. Like, what is it? I love the idea of that. A lot of people might think that sounds hippy dippy, and like, how does it actually work in a concrete way? You know what I mean? Like, how do you get people to wrap their minds around that?
So these are models to explore for maybe like a firmware upgrade to capitalism, right? Because typically, who is on your board of directors? There's no qualification other than you wrote a check and you're a shareholder. But then the representatives are only investors who are out to maximize their returns. Hence, it's all about just profit per share. I think we need an upgrade to capitalism that's just beyond monotonic variables like price per share or profit. Profit itself isn't bad, but we look at where does the profit flow. If it's just to a handful of people, then that's not taking into account the greater community that companies are a part of. A company is a member of a community that's broad ranging beyond just the customers and investors. There is nature and ecology that it affects. There's the cities that it resides in. So when you think of regenerative models, I like to look at nature and symbiotic relationships and healthy ecosystems as a picture of where we should go. I'd like to see capitalism models mirror more of how nature works in symbiosis. And so if governance is a way to play that, then the board of directors and who's on the board of directors can help with that. And who you give a portion of equity ownership of the company to can represent that notion of inclusive stakeholding as well. Lastly, I've been studying a lot of what B Labs and public benefit corps have been doing. I'm very inspired to see more of our startup companies adopt B Corp-like models where they take their values, their ethics, principles, and incorporate them into the company charter and really try to make those transparent and abide by those. So instead of mission statements, which are just a bunch of like fluffy fortune cookie, lip service on values, when you really believe it, if you put it into your company charter and then establish it as a B Corp and go through the headache of doing such, that's even more so walking the talk. And I'm encouraged to see more companies doing that. Patagonia is probably my favorite. The CEO of Patagonia is a rock star woman who is my business crush right now.
Love it. Yeah, I was going to say, what companies are out there right now that are executing on this vision? And like, are there any out there that are just coming up that we can keep our eye out for?
For sure. Patagonia is probably the highest profile one to me. There's large scale startups that are doing this. I think Allbirds, I believe Etsy, a few others are B Corps. One of our largest companies, Grove Collaborative, from day one wanted to be a B Corp, and they just committed to being totally plastic free in another couple of years. But that's an example of trying to put your values into the charter of the company. B Corp is a relatively new program, but there's more and more companies doing this. There's more industry alliances that are signing up to be carbon neutral or plastic free. And so I think part of this is also establishing a positive peer pressure culture. And, I'm on a few nonprofits which are trying to do this a bit, where you get leading companies and CEOs to plant their flag in the ground and then encourage others to do that. So you kind of create that positive peer pressure. I think that's often what it takes, because you can't just do it by regulation, and you can't do it with just sticks or punitive measures. It's a bit also creating a culture for this as well. And the good news, I really do believe consumers want this now. Gen Z, they often suffer this literal existential crisis of eco dread, I think the term is. There's so many Gen Z, folks out there who are going to therapy because they're worried, am I going to have a world to grow up into? Right? Greta Thunberg's a wonderful representative of that. And so they want to vote with their dollars on products, brands, and services that really walk this talk and are designed from the ground up to be more sustainable, regenerative, that tie into these values.
I love that. I've never heard of positive peer pressure. And that's like my favorite new thing that you just said.
Make it
That's
cool to be, eco-friendly, carbon neutral. Make it uncool to just be following the old consumptive capitalism model.
How can legacy companies make a shift, or is it too late?
I think they have to. It's a matter of do or die, right? And so the forward-thinking ones will look at how they're being threatened by shifts in consumer attitudes and also crisis moments like COVID, and they all have to reinvent. The ones who are really clever, I think, figure out how to shift their business models. Believe it or not, this is an older example. Nokia used to be in the rubber boots business, and then they shifted into cell phones. But these days, I think you'll have a lot of companies that will look at how they can deliver their services virtually and over Zoom. You have to have everything, telehealth, teletherapy, teleteaching. And I think if they're really, really committed to being a positive player in the planet, they're going to look at how they tie their impact and their metrics even to things like the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. There are now metrics and scores and indexes that are on this. The clever companies will use this to their branding advantage. It'll even be on their packaging to say, hey, this amount of carbon was offset to bring this product to you. Our eco score is this. We're trying to walk our talk. And my dream is, how food products, they have the nutritional macros that are required by the FDA and everything else there. I am wondering, will we soon have things like carbon, climate, other impact, SDG scores on packaging? Really clever companies will jump on that, list that explicitly on the packaging to say, look, we are trying to support the SDGs and how we bring these products to you.
Yeah, I think that's so important. It's interesting because I was even talking to some people yesterday, and they have a bit of the not negative, but they're jaded a bit. And that, with Michael Moore and all these experts saying it's just too little, too late, and at this point, like there's nothing really we can do to reverse things. What do you say to those people?
So the good news is that's why we do have innovative startup companies. With COVID, we've seen so much business shift to e-commerce and direct to consumer. This could be where old dinosaurs die and newer companies pop up, especially ones that are built for this new era and are maybe built for this type of sustainability and conscious type of value adherence. And I think that will resonate again with younger consumers and those that believe in it, this shift towards kind of a more regenerative, healthier type of business ecosystem. They will vote with their dollars. One example, we have a company called Grove Collaborative. They are kind of trying to be the next Unilever, truly organic, sustainable home care goods, personal care goods, designed for reduced shipping footprint. If everything's e-commerce, a lot of home care products like detergents and cleaners, it's mostly water. Why wouldn't you just send a tiny little vial of concentrate? The consumer add their own water. Why not use reusable glass jars instead of plastic? So that's just one small example of how these next-gen companies are designing for this new reality, and they're winning huge market share away from these large incumbent companies, right? So that's just an example of how the new generation of companies are designed from the ground up with these values in mind.
Yeah, and I, by the way, totally agree. And as questions pop up, please put them in the comments, and we'll bring you in through video and audio because this is just an open forum. But I was going to say, and a lot of people look at those companies. But by the way, I'm a fan, and they say, well, how can they scale? Because if someone's buying one, and it's good to keep that one thing for a while, how do the companies continue making money? Which is obviously like, where we've fallen into that trap in the past with other companies. Like we don't really need more, but how do you balance that out?
I think part of this too comes from the investors and the founders and their intention. We're kind of on this treadmill of late stage capitalism where it's just like produce more, consume more, produce more, because our only metrics are again around growth at any cost, keep growing, keep growing. I starting to realize that doesn't fit with how nature works. Nothing grows in nature permanently forever, except, well, cancer until it kills the host organism, right? And so can you build businesses that are maybe more like networks that are around reuse, recycling, accessibility, regenerative type models. Now that'll shift businesses away from just the constant production type of model. Maybe then a new metric is active usage of units produced that are in the field. That's about utilization as opposed to just production. Similarly, I've decided I'm not going to invest anymore in free advertising-based companies anymore, because when we have that business model, the inevitable conclusion is you must addict your users. You have to get them addicted to digital products, and then you're doing cognitive strip mining on their attention. It's just not good for human health and wellness. So I'd rather, the companies have subscription or paid for content or something a bit more curated that is aligned with, the customer's interest. So again, back to first principles, look at the models we use for these things. How do we define value? How do we define growth? There are more companies that will be looking at how we innovate on these areas beyond just, again, production, consumption.
And shout out to Never Alone, who are here, the Never Alone Summit team. I just wanted to, look at
Hi, sorry we're late.
Oh my God, no. Can you just, we're just talking about sustainability. But
wonderful.
As we continue this convo, just because you're here and you might, I know, need to shift because you are in the middle of an event. Do you want to say anything to everyone or ask any questions or introduce yourselves, please?
Go ahead. Okay, first of all, thank you so much for organizing this as a support to our summit. Thank you for tuning in to our summit. We've just actually finished about an hour and a half ago. So it was a marathon where we were able to really hear incredible speakers share their body of knowledge about mental health and mental assessments and how we can create practical tools during these times, but also readdress a conversation that we already needed to have. It's the other side of the coin of COVID. Like, we realize that we're alone, that we've been isolated, but we've also created isolation in our minds. And I think the mental health conversation was something that we should have had before, and it's just been, overseen, and there's been a lot of different conversations, different parts of the globe. And we realize that the importance today is to actually have a global conversation, a coalition. The fact that, you're doing this with Tim. Tim, thank you so much. We heard you just before. Thank you for being a wonderful guest. And thank you for doing what you do, because we need to just be a general voice. We need to all be together with the different colors, with the different, mind frames, different ages, different industries.
So I want to add one thing, Mrs. Punacha. So I think one of the things we want to talk about is actually a call to action from the Silicon Valley, right? From the entrepreneurs, because today we're not talking about precision mental health. We are still talking about mental health as a broad brush, and we need to rebrand mental health and change the conversation with the stigma, but also get more precise, because with the technology, with genomics, with all the advances, especially, I think we want to get what we call the 5 Ps. We get more precise predictability. We can predict mental health, we can prevent it, we need to personalize it, set up a process and a platform. And I really believe the entrepreneurs, the Bay Area, this is where I think, I would say innovation can really happen. And that's really our moonshot. And we actually, we called up a bunch of people today, so we would love to have an X Prize for mental health. And I called up Naveen Jain from Wyoming, and we're going to call up Anusha Ansari, and Deepak's on board. And we said, and maybe Tim, this is putting you on the spot.
We're zooming in on you right now.
It's fantastic. I can float that. I'm actually on the X Prize Pandemic Track Council. They just spun up, so we can definitely bring this to attention. Mental health is one of the tracks in there too, so happy to support that idea.
Wonderful, sir. Thank you so much. And it means a lot to us. And so we just want to at least stop in and say hello. But I think we'll be continued, but we'll make sure we send an email. I'd love to get your support.
And thank you.
Oh, thank you guys for bringing this all together. I'm excited to collaborate more in the future. And everyone, for more info, where should people go if they want to get involved after this event, since you're continuing the work?
neveralonesummit.live, L-I-V-E.
Yes.
.live.
All right, we'll put that in the chat right now.
Thank you.
Oh,
and then we'll get back. Once again, thank you again for everything.
Yes, thank you. I'll see you guys on FaceTime soon. We'll have FaceTime.
You're
amazing.
Take care. Be safe.
I love that. I love how connected we are all, and it's like amazing how this all came together, and we get.
I know, and thank you for everything. You're a great team behind it. We need to hang out after.
We will, yes, and not just on FaceTime, and not just. We've been all hanging out on FaceTime.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
So I have a question.
Yes.
Coming out of that, Tim, what do you think the future of health and wellness needs to be now that we're going through this time of pause and this time of really feeling our isolation? How does the industry need to change post-COVID?
Yeah, absolutely. A few thoughts for you here. The first is digital health stocks have exploded in value because everyone realizes telemedicine is a must-have, but it won't stop there. We're going to need everything from teletherapy, teleparenting help, telecoaching. Everything needs to be deliverable remotely as well. And that will persist even after we can go back to in-person. But it's a transformation of those types of work. How do you deliver services remotely and virtually? There will be a couple other interesting models too on the mental health side. If you've seen a startup company called 7 Cups, they were an active listening network. I think we'll see more of this growing globally. I think this notion is peer support. Another wonderful example is Project Zendo. They provide psychedelic peer support at Burning Man when people are having tough times, but they're basically volunteers who are certified and trained. Imagine Zendo for everything on a global basis, 24/7, by a global force of certified volunteers. There could also be a way for people to earn wages as a digital workforce, just doing peer support and holding space for each other. So this is a new form of, I think, mutual aid that will pop up. A bigger moonshot. When the Great Depression kicked in, we instantiated the WPA, which would put people back to work. Back then, they were digging ditches, constructing roads, building dams, etc. What would a digital WPA look like for today in the spirit of mutual aid for people to be supporting each other, even if it's just holding space, active listening, for some folks to be therapy, for other folks to be tech assistants on how to run Zoom and do their job. I'm seeing maybe we could have a new civilian service corps that puts people back to work, but use more around this North Star of supporting each other. That's kind of my answer too for what do we do when robots and AI take the jobs away? The only thing left really is for us to basically serve and support each other and make art and play. But this is kind of how I view the broadening of the healthcare space. It'll hopefully lead to health and wellness as opposed to healthcare. And something Mayo Clinic has always said is, let's get away from just healthcare, because by the time you need healthcare, you're kind of screwed. So let's get people thinking about health and wellness from the start, body, mind, and soul,
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, the question is though, so do you believe that demand is going to grow exponentially enough to support this happening, right? That there needs to be, there's exchange of money as well for people, to be able to hold this space. If we're saying we're going to employ people to hold the space, then is the money going to be there in order to do that?
Yeah, and the money part is interesting because there's a couple of vectors. There's the out of pocket for those that can afford it and really need it, and then of course there's going to be the insurance reimbursable side of it, and that's going to go through a lot of transformation as well as insurance companies realize they need to start reimbursing more for telehealth services, telewellness. We're going to see that for therapy and coaching as well. We have new forms of breakthrough treatments like psychedelic medicine that are coming out as well too. That provides a whole new tool. But then also the field of mindfulness is really on the rise too. I bet you it won't be too long before insurance companies and employers will reimburse for regular mindfulness coaching. And so that's another form of that mental health resource. On top of that, we're going to have wearables, and this is a bit further out there, but it's coming soon. If you remember the movie Her, starring Scarlett Johansson, who is like in your ear, like an Apple AirPod style hearable, imagine a pocket Buddha, if you will, that's an AI that's learning you and providing prompts just like a good therapist or coach would, able to detect if you're getting negative in your mood or your communication styles. It's almost like having a therapist in your pocket. So we'll have tools like that that can provide you continuous 24/7 support. And as wearables get smarter, they can measure if you're starting to get sad or you're starting to get reclusive or kind of going negative in your mental state in real time. So I do view this as the fusing of the best of human services augmented by technology to provide that scale, because we don't have enough therapists and enough humans out there to provide the support we need for everybody yet.
Wow. Pocket Buddha. I'm down. I wanted to, we usually finish this at 6:30. And so I just want to open it up for some questions because we can continue asking things, but I want to make sure that everyone who's here, who definitely wanted to talk to you and connect with you, gets a chance to ask questions. Let us know.
I have a question here that came in from Brian. I'm going to read it for him.
Okay.
he says, as a contemporary venture capital looks for scale at all costs, do you see the business of VC evolving where more investments can be made into smaller, conscious, profitable companies versus one Uber every 10 years?
That's my hope. And the way that has to start is the sources of money where VCs invest from, namely these so-called limited partners, those institutions need to start caring about impact metrics beyond just IRR and cash-on-cash return. But the good news is this last spring when we raised a new fund for Mayfield, that was the first time I had limited partners come to us and ask specifically, how are your investments supporting UN SDGs? I've never in 20 years heard that question before, and that just really inspired me. It showed that those sources of capital, those institutions, they care. If they care, they'll ask those hard questions of the investors they back, which give us license to ask entrepreneurs that same thing. So a lot of times, again, the intention, the agenda of the pools of capital can shape this. So I'm viewing this as our collective job to influence pension funds, endowments, high net worth families, et cetera, to ask those questions. If they care, they will force the investors to care as well. And that'll trickle all the way down to the entrepreneurs. I think we are at the beginning of the zeitgeist change. And, I just hope that it's not too late to do that.
Thanks, Tim.
Mark has a question.
Hi. It's kind of dovetails into the previous question a little bit, but as an investor yourself, so you're handling the limited partners funds and you're telling them what your intentions are to use it, and I guess projecting their IRR over your historical investments and future investments, showing you're successful. But can't you start saying, even before, we're going to put a fund together and it's only going to invest in companies that obviously you believe have growth, profitability, and have a policy of planet awareness. I'm going to use that phrase because I think you used it earlier. And that's, you start the ball versus having your investors saying, hey, how planet aware is this company? Because you're the one sitting on the board and you're the one investing the money, and they're forced to listen to you, whether they like it or not, for a lot of elements.
That is correct. It's managing both the entrepreneurs and startups we invest into and trying to promulgate that message and showing the results that it's working back to limited partners. This message, like I said, we kind of stumbled into it by doing it accidentally, but then it gave a lot of ammunition to go back to limited partners and say, you know what, we want to double down on these healthier business models. Now that you've seen the results from companies like Lyft and Poshmark that are trying to be better and more regenerative, and you're seeing that you can do well by doing good, we'd like to really focus on this and only do these kind of companies. Once you have those results, limited partners say, sounds good, go for it. What's tougher is if you're a first-time fund trying to raise funds saying, I want to be planet healthy. A lot of limited partners, unless they're bought in that mission, they'll say, yeah, right, show me the numbers first. And so you're right, it is incumbent, especially upon us who have the track record, the gravitas, and the credibility to push that agenda. And if we can show that with the results, it works really well. My friend James Joaquin at Obvious Ventures did this with Beyond Meat and showed how that could be a do well by do good company. And they also even kicked off what's called the World Positive Term Sheet, so that they ask their founders to sign it, interpret what does World Positive mean for them as a written agreement with the investors. I love that, and I hope that sparks a movement. I'm going to start trying to do the same thing, where now values and ethics is even part of the funding discussion beyond just the economic terms.
Wow, that's really cool. Does anyone else have a question at all? That we've got you here. I know a lot of people on their phones. Just let me know. I will
say that I think we should put the Himalayas of Nepal on the board of directors for Peace Inside Live.
There you go. And what's cool is that you could brainstorm who would represent that voice, right? Would it be, the Dalai Lama or somebody like that who would represent that stakeholder? And that's the interesting part. Yeah.
It's so cool.
My dream too is that this could be a way to reward leading nonprofits that are experts in these areas, because maybe if they get equity ownership, they get financial support instead of just begging donors all the time to stay alive. So this is a really big interest area for me. How do we interweave and make interdependent the world of impact, nonprofits, and for-profits? And all for-profits have a foundation that give back. Can nonprofits operate with some of the operational excellence of for-profits? Can we tie them together so that, both sides are benefiting? These are the ideas of these hybrid next-gen models we look at.
Yeah, I think that's so important. What are your thoughts on, I guess, like it's like blockchain and all, all these technologies that, are in our industries, it's kind of like old school at this point, but there's still buzzwords in different spaces. Are these things that you even think about or care about?
Yeah, especially after the first sort of mercenary get rich quick wave went away, the use case for blockchain is higher than ever, especially when you think about, imagine digital identity tied to your active and antibody presence for COVID tests. Like that's a thing now. People are going to be thinking about that. It's like, your wristband or your identity is actually tied, blockchain verified to your, COVID test status. And that gives you ability to roam around or not. So we'll see things like that. That can be used for some pretty dystopian scenarios, like the whole Big Brother surveillance part. And I think China is going down that path pretty quickly. But, digital currencies are experiencing a big comeback now too, especially as certain fiat currencies are starting to fail, go into hyperinflation, et cetera. I think people will now see renewed interest in Bitcoin and other digital currencies.
And before I welcomed the Never Alone Summit folks, we were talking about obviously mental health and accountability of companies, but like with us relying so much on social media and platforms like Facebook to get the word out, and Instagram, and and then they own WhatsApp, like how do we hold those types of companies accountable? Or obviously it creates an opening for other innovation, but what's your take on that?
Yep. So I work a little bit with Tristan Harris's Center for Humane Tech and a few other efforts trying to fight digital addiction. One, it's raising public awareness of like, hey, you are all digital slaves. You're being cognitively strip mined, with your attention, to raise the awareness, hopefully shift that, demand away from them. But second, work with these large platform companies and try to give them alternative business models beyond just free and advertising base, so that they have incentive and ideas to do other business models that aren't so harmful for mental health. The third is let's create new alternatives. One thing that makes me really encouraged is in this now Zoom economy, I'm actually seeing more human connection, and this might be the solve to the endless Facebook or social media feed. What I mean by that, right now, we're all live. This interaction feels a whole lot more authentic than if I'm just doing some curated Instagram post where it's like a perfectly placed picture. And so there's something magical about real time talking to people, hearing their voices, seeing their faces, that is much more authentic than the so-called crafted perfect social media post. And that's what I've seen the innovation on in these real-time interactive experiences. I'm calling this sort of the birth of the experiential web. So maybe it's the birth of the fourth internet. If the first internet was just about pages, the second internet was about widgets of audio and video, and the third internet was about social and mobile apps, this fourth internet might be the Zoom rooms or Twitch servers or Discord sessions, and it's about real-time interaction between people with their live personas. And for me, that often feels a lot more intimate, authentic, I was hearing that even the online dating scene has shifted. It's no longer the whole Tinder hookup culture. It's now about companionship as opposed to casual sex. And people are actually finally having quality conversations, right? So I'm really kind of interested in how we innovate on this authentic connection now in this era.
Yeah, I would love to discover that too on these dating apps. Kidding. I was ready to make a joke about that. No, I am fascinated. Dating right now is an interesting thing. That's a whole other conversation. I also wanted to get your take on like companies like Amazon, who seem to be, killing it in this time. And then, with Jeff Bezos becoming possibly the world's first trillionaire. What is your take there? Because obviously they're providing a ton of jobs, that is needed right now. But I also think, are we quote unquote too hard on companies like that, where, on the, in terms of like how they're contributing to their communities and the taxes and like the packaging, are we too hard, or is this something that we should be putting more positive pressure on?
We absolutely should, starting with consumers and advocacy. And here's the thing, Amazon could shift the needle so much just by getting rid of some of their packaging. It drives me bonkers when you order stuff from them and half the stuff can't even be recycled. And, they don't even really make it easy for customers to choose the option of like get rid of some of the packaging. I think there was such an option, but it was buried deep in the settings or something like that. Imagine if every Amazon packaging had a little bit less plastic, a little bit less of this stuff, and customers could opt in for that. Huge game changer right there, right? It's also not lost upon me the irony of the fact that COVID basically works by attacking the airways of humans. And what have we been doing? We've been attacking Mother Nature's airways by burning down her lungs, of those lungs named after the very mega corporation that we're supporting. It's almost like if this was an episode of Black Mirrors, the writer's notes would be like all red saying, this is a little too literal.
For real. I mean, Mark, so you have another question?
Yeah, you know, I'm going to show you this picture I took in my office. And I wanted to post it on Instagram, but I don't have enough followers. And I wanted to say, no, I said, the world is crying, but Amazon is smiling. Look at that little, a little box of hair stuff and that massive packaging from Amazon.
Right. This breaks my heart, and I'm trying to get off of Amazon.
It amazes me that, you know, with the youth and the internet and all this connectivity, that nobody is saying a word in a loud fashion. You know, they're not using social media to shame Amazon. You know,
yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point.
That amazes me as an old guy.
Well, maybe we should do something about this. Maybe we can raise the flag and start a movement. It's could you imagine a Greta Thunberg that's sort of like, you know, hashtag better packaging or less packaging? Like that should be the next rallying cry, really.
Yeah.
Why wait for Greta Thunberg?
I thought change.org. No, but I thought
you guys have the social media. It's just like taking a picture like that and shaming them, period.
Well, yeah.
Why are you waiting for a leader? You guys are the leaders.
Well, it is also why we push a lot of our companies to move towards committing towards no plastic, less packaging, those sorts of things. So a lot of the startups we work with are trying to do that. By the way, this is a huge issue now. Now that every restaurant and local business is a delivery pickup service, you know, the thing they worry about is regulations require individually packaged everything. So they're pressured to put things in more and more plastic, even though we have more, you know, pickup and drop off now. So that's the weird tension that we're looking at here. But this is an underinvested area, is compostable regenerative packaging for e-commerce. That's a big one. It's not sexy, but it's huge and moves the needle. So that's an area I'm definitely looking at as well.
Yeah. So what, I mean, I'm sure there's people that there's all different types of people here, from, I think, founders to entrepreneurs. What right now, like, are you looking at, like, do you feel like the investment space is right now in a bit of a pause because people are in a fear mode, or is there space for growth right now? Or like, where are you at? And are you taking pitches? Like, how does this work right now for you?
It's been challenging because our motto is usually like, you know, people first, meaning it's about people, and to get to know people, we have to spend a lot of hours in person. We've never made an investment, never meeting people before, so we're trying to figure out that investment process right now. Can you do it over Zoom? But, you know, if necessity is the mother of invention, we've never had more opportunities for invention than right now. And so there's a lot of innovation happening right now, not just biosecurity for testing of COVID and things like that, but also this, I jokingly called it the Zoom economy. But we have to reinvent every form of service to be delivered remotely now. And we're shifting from work from home to work from anywhere. And I think once people have this will persist. We'll have a new normal after this, and some people won't want to go back to the office. That makes changes in commercial real estate, office layouts. Maybe it's a diaspora away from overpriced cities like San Francisco back to suburbs and countryside or places more in nature. I'm seeing a rise in survival or resilience tech. More people interested in growing their own food, producing their own energy, you know, kind of being more in touch with nature, knowing the central grid is not as reliable as before. And, you know, soon we're going to have wildfire season and more climate collapse effects. So a lot of these things are top of mind for folks. The Zoom economy is spurring a lot of companies now on new work modes virtually. This hot startup called Clubhouse. It's like Zoom of audio.
Yeah, I'm on it. Are you on it? I need to see you on it.
Yeah, there's, you know, that's just one example of new interaction models that happen remotely and digitally. So that's the big gold rush right now, is how do we reinvent things like restaurants or coaching and teaching or things like that to be done even at a distance.
Elise has a question. I'll read it, Elise, or you can say it out loud if you want, whatever works for you. If you want to unmute yourself.
Hi. Yeah, sure. This has been really eye-opening and amazing. Yeah, so I love the Earth Equity, your ideas around stakeholders, but I also realize that a lot of portfolio managers are judged by benchmarks that don't really incorporate what's good for society and the planet, and just wondering if you had any ideas around how we could change that to encourage more kind of planet and society friendly placements.
Good question. A lot of this is often that age-old conundrum about metrics and index scoring. There's been some attempts like Jin and Irina and others. We need more innovation there. We're seeing more companies, more associations try to come up with these scoring metrics. And the big one, we've had ESGs before, right? But now I think we're seeing folks try to come up with metrics tied to UN SDGs as well, too. So that is one aspect that we're trying to figure out. Can our companies redefine and expand the definition of what value and growth is? Right. So a mental health version would be, let me just think of one like here, like if there was a next gen social media company, instead of just engagement, maybe it would be scoring the sentiment of how people feel after they read the content. Or if there was a company really focused on wellness of users, it would focus on maximum allowed time per user per day. You know what I mean? In the name of not addicting your users. So those are just some examples where could you have metrics that are tied to the intention of the business model as well, if it's about wellness for the customer.
Wow. That's so powerful. How does it make you feel? And that's like the judge of the metric. That's some powerful stuff. Does anyone else have any questions? Feel free to unmute yourself, or Brian is, I love Brian. No, I think it's so fascinating. There's so much going on at once. What do you do as an investor with so much going on for your own mental health and sanity? And what's your routine?
Daily meditation and spending more and more time on impact and relief projects. That's really been good for me to not get too looped into the fear of what happens. I've been involved in a couple of relief projects. One is, you may have read about the town of Bolinas. We crowdfunded to test every resident there and try to replicate what cities like Vo in Italy did to clear a whole town and then create new options. We did that in Bolinas, then the Mission neighborhood in San Francisco. And that looks like that'll be a whole new service sector as well. Testing, pop-up testing as a service for towns, elderly care centers, corporations. The second is I personally had 4 people I know in my extended tribe of friends pass away from COVID in the last month. And so I've attended more digital funerals than I ever thought I would. And I'm the board of Reimagine Death, which is trying to resource and arm the public on how to process end of life, especially in the age of COVID. You can't go to funerals. You can't do a lot of these things, and people don't know what to do. So recently, we all put out a guide on how to do digital memorials. So that was pretty important because, we're seeing more and more deaths now. I think 100,000 cases in the US already. Everybody's going to know somebody who's passed. And how do you process grief in this era? You have to do these things over Zoom now, and there's no ritual or best practice for that.
Yeah, we actually had Brad on one of these Peace Inside Live conversations. And we're doing, what are we doing, Jordana? We're hosting something with them, right?
Yeah, so in June, we have a Reimagine week on Peace Inside Live.
Thank you for supporting them. Yeah, that's fantastic.
I mean, we're so excited to, we don't even feel like we're supporting them. It's just so aligned with our mission to support everyone, this community, and living fully, and being able to talk about what they haven't been able to talk about, what we haven't had the tools for. So that week it's going to be in, I believe it's either the first or the second week of June. We're just nailing it down now, but there will be a class every single day that's focused around one of the 4 themes for Reimagine.
And I got to tell you, I hope all teachers get a pay raise after this, because people realize just how hard it is to teach after doing homeschooling for, a couple months. You start to appreciate your teachers too.
I think that there are certain industries definitely that were underappreciated, and that we realize that need more care, that need more resources. Yeah, where do you see all that going?
Again, this will be my dream is we have this new civilian service corps of people able to do mutual aid and support each other, even if it's remotely. right? So we're going to need that. Everybody needs support on things. For example, if you don't have good bandwidth now, it's like you are a different class of citizen, because if you can't do your work over Zoom, then you're disadvantaged in even a new way. So there's not just a digital divide, there's now like a Zoom divide, which is like the quality of your bandwidth to be able to do remote work. So that's just one example of folks that need more support, right? So could they get IT support, like with the peer support network out there on a volunteer basis? We'll have all these new needs for how we all help each other out. And these are also opportunities for new forms of employment too. I had one joke for you, like, a lot of comedians are out of work because they can't do their stand-up comedy. Comedians have great personalities to be MCs. There's now demand for people to be on-demand MCs for remote weddings or remote meetups or team building meetings. So again, imagine a marketplace where you can book people to MC or facilitate your Zoom meetup. Like, that's starting to happen. Again, new forms of work. Again, my dream is, can we utilize people's gifts, their personalities, their truest talents in support of each other?
Yeah, and I think that, there's a comment from Mark, always has lots of questions. Do you think everyone will realize that people can't survive on single digit minimum wages now that they get money without working? What does that mean?
That's related to the UBI and stimulus checks, right? It sounds good in theory, but if you're only getting a couple $100 and you can't really pay your rent.
Got it. Yeah. What is your take on that? Because I think that I don't like that as an excuse for like, oh, someone gets a few stimulus checks and that's going to like be like, it is a game changer, but like, let's be clear, it's not sustainable. And unemployment, oh wow, like they're getting $4,200 a month. That says more about the wages than about the unemployment.
That's right. That's why I really do think, man, I wish we had better administration in the White House. I hate to say it, but if we had true visionaries at the top, they would realize it is time to create a new form of this WPA to put people back to work, create these new forms of work, create that infrastructure, and much of that work may be digital, right? Again, part of these types of digital jobs may be things like remote work, remote peer support, holding space, helping folks out, those sorts of things. Could it be that we also tie UBI to being able to be skilled for those new types of work as well, right? I think this is the time, the necessity for that, to run those experiments of forms of universal basic income, maybe also then supported by new forms of purpose, meaning, and work, even if that form of work is digital work.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Unless someone else has we're like at exactly our time. We typically do this intention setting meditation going out of this. If anyone else has another question, now's the time, or else we'll wrap it up. Or if you have anything else to share, Tim, that we haven't covered or touched on.
Last thing I'll say is I've really shifted my lens too, is we've chased scale. Everything's about scale and big and fast. And if anything COVID's really helped me do is slow the heck down. For me, it's been hashtag no mo FOMO. It feels so good when people ask, what are you doing Wednesday night? It's like, my calendar's completely open. There's no conference to miss. There's no flight to catch. And I was thinking, man, I think I'd be happy if I never set foot in a conference hall ever again. Maybe, what if I never took a flight again? So there's something really beautiful about this stillness, this slowness. Also, I've been learning to grow my own food, just as a way to get back in touch with nature. I've never had more time in nature before, taught my 7-year-old to ride a bike. I kind of don't want to go back to business as usual. I would like some of this stillness to persist. It's forced me to be extremely, extremely careful and curated on who I spend time with, right? As opposed to meet everybody, who are just the 10 people I would meet up with if I could. That level of slow, careful, kind of small is all, I would like to see that energy persist.
Yeah, I think that's what a lot of us are thinking about. Some of us, I can't speak for everyone, but I'm definitely thinking about that. Like, can we take these lessons and bring them into our lives once this shifts, right? I don't think there's a back to normal, but whatever this new world looks like, will we just forget about everything and go back and have to relearn this again and get tested again by the universe in a way? Like, how many times are we going to like fall down and realize that something's not working before making a change? So
I think you're right.
Yeah.
I just want to say, like, of all the possible apocalypses, COVID's a rather gentle one compared to, alien invasion, nuclear war, all these other things too. And so maybe planet Earth is giving us a chance to reflect on what we can do differently. And if we don't get the download now, I'm pretty sure COVID-21 is going to be a lot harsher lesson.
All right. Well, Tim Chang, thank you for your positivity, your optimism, your work in spaces that might push back, and really thinking about a better future, and and being committed to that. I really appreciate it.
Thank all of you. I'm here to learn from you guys as well, and the examples you're living every day. So thank you guys.
Yeah, no, this is awesome. This has been so special. And yeah, speaking of psychedelics, we have Rick, the founder of MAPS, Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies, joining us on June 7th on our Peace Inside live conversation that Sunday. So, it's like all these connections.
Yes. Webs of webs. I love it.
Exactly. Well, yeah, thank you again. And thank you to everyone for hanging out with us on this Sunday, a Memorial Day weekend. I know partially some people are working on vacation, doing whatever you're doing, but you gave us your time and space to be here. And so we so appreciate you for that. And on that note, I know Jordana will wrap this up with an intention setting meditation before we say goodbye. And again, you can check out all our programming and everything we do at peaceinside.live.